Hello and welcome to the Bout of Insanity podcast. This will be the third episode of these podcasts, where I mainly discuss history and politics. But I will say, if you're more interested in the politics, this one is for you, okay? If you're here for the history rambles and everything else, you might want to go on to the other two episodes. Maybe not episode 1, because there I spoke, I think, 25 minutes talking about the US Constitution and some more time talking about Parliament. So maybe stay away from episode 1 if you want to hear about history, but you feel free to go over to episode 2. I only talk a little about politics here. So yes, this, as I say, will be the third episode, and today the question which I put to myself, and yes, I mean question this time, not questions. Usually I talk about multiple things, but I've already recorded an episode today. It's the same episode, but I deleted all of it accidentally. I closed the app because usually it just... Well, I went to cut something out, but it wasn't working, so I closed the app to reboot it because it usually saves, and then I go on and nothing's there. So, ho-hum, as people say. But anyway, I've already gone off topic and strayed away. This will give me an opportunity to try and refine all of the mistakes which I made in the last recording, because I knew there were loads just by talking. I could just tell there are a load of pauses, a load of mispronunciations, a load of everything wrong for a podcast which you do not want to listen to, even less than usual. But yes, you've already seen the title of the video, so now I will tell you in this video, just to make you feel sure that you're listening to the right one. Will the Labour Party come back? The question I put to myself is the Labour Party rising again? Recently there was a by-election in a York constituency, Batley and Spen, and Labour won. Specifically, the MP Kim Leadbeater, who is sister of the Labour MP Joe Cox, who sadly a few years ago was murdered, politically assassinated. Anyway, different topic for a different day. It feels like Labour are coming back, as I see all of the stories of the Batley and Spen. There's something in the air which suggests Labour are coming back. Maybe Keir Starmer has finally got a foothold and he knows what to do, and he's going to strive and regain popularity for his party. But is that really the case? Because they were down 7.42% of the popular vote. Last time, I presume, the 2019 election, they got 7.42% more of a popular vote. Now I must note that the Conservative Party standing in Batley and Spen also lost 1%. More likely that it was just complete disillusionment to the two parties, which made Labour and Conservative voters maybe vote the other side, maybe vote for a different party entirely. You know, Batley and Spen, it's a Labour-held seat, some would refer to as a safe seat. The fact that Labour so narrowly won it suggests there's something wrong. It suggests that Labour's woes are not over. Just because they won one by-election does not mean that they're coming back like a storm, and they're going to form a government in these coming years. It's not what's going to happen. Well, I say that. It could be anyone in the next election. I can't tell you what's going to happen in the next election, because if this current government sorts everything about the pandemic out then, and gets the economy on track, I think there's a fair chance they can win. But if they really struggle up until around about 2024, 2025, around about then yeah, I think it's quite possible that the Labour Party could win it. Not necessarily Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, which I will get onto later. So yes, it does feel like, and a lot of people say this, that Labour Party has lost the trust of the working class, and that the working class vote Conservative, which a lot of them do, especially in the 2019 election. They're not all left-wing, they're not all socialists, they're not Corbynites. That's the main problem. That was the main problem with Jeremy Corbyn, that maybe there's people who are just as left-wing as him, but they actually feel patriotic, and they feel, hang on, Jeremy Corbyn wants to disarm some of the military, and he wants to get rid of NATO and the Trident nuclear program. That's not something I want to vote for. Maybe the opposite, and like a middle class champagne socialist, as they're called, he's the perfect candidate to them. But do they actually understand the working class communities? Some of them don't. I don't want to say all of them, because I don't want to sound like these right-wingers online who say the Labour Party is doomed, they're all communists, look at their supporters, they're bloody gay, they have half their head shaved, you don't want to get involved with them, they're going to ruin this country. Like, come on. If there is someone who doesn't believe in prisons, thinks that the police should be abolished, and want to overthrow the state to create a communist revolution, they're not going to vote Labour, especially not with Keir Starmer. You know, they're not Labour supporters, they're some other party. I'm not going to say whether it's right or wrong for them to think like that. That's not what I'm talking about today. But really, even Jeremy Corbyn, he says he wants to tame capitalism. Imagine telling a Marxist that capitalism can even be tamed. They don't believe it. They, for better or for worse, they think that capitalism is inherently exploitive. You cannot have capitalism and equality in their theories. So people who are genuine communists, they don't even want Jeremy Corbyn. Just like in America, communists and socialists, do they actually support Bernie Sanders? Well, yeah, they want Medicare for all, as they say. In America, they want a national health system, and they want some other things which Bernie wants, but they are not traditional Bernie Sanders voters. They're completely different, because all these right-wingers saying, well, they're all communists, why, if Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn isn't a communist, why does he get so much communist support? Well, okay, if Trump isn't racist, how come he gets racist support? It's because they're the closest thing to what they want, but still miles behind what they want. It's mainly because of a two-party system, which is why they're voting for that. In a perfect world, there wouldn't be a two-party system. There'd be the racist party, there'd be the Communist Party, there'd be Conservative and Labour, there'd be the slightly Liberal Party, there'd be the Gay Rights Party, there'd be everything, and they'd all be in Parliament, and they'd all be discussing, but that's not how it is. It's not practical. There are, in most countries, most of the parties are left-wing and right-wing, and they're massive. In the UK, the left-wing party is traditionally Labour, and they're massive, and the right-wing is traditionally Conservative, and they're huge as well. They both have a lot of members, they have a lot of supporters who think differently. That's what makes a two-party system at least bearable most of the time, because there are different wings of the party, just like in America with the left-wing Democrats, Bernie Sanders and AOC, I forget her real name, just Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or someone. You've got those lot on the left, and you've got the Blue Dog Democrats, as they're nicknamed, on the right, and they're very close to the centre. They'd even fit in with some of the Republicans. Then in the Republicans you have the Trumpists, and you have the mainstream Republicans, and then you have even some of the more left-wing Republicans. I can't remember what they're called, who often caucus with the Democrats, just as in the UK it's smaller here because there's more parties. There's the SNP, there's the Liberals, there's even the Greens, who have a lot more influence here on what they do in America. But you have Brexit Conservatives, you have Remain Conservatives, you have Libertarian Conservatives, and they get a lot of the spotlight nowadays because of the COVID pandemic and lockdown and everything. And then you have Conservatives who are mainly focused on patriotism and actually conserving stuff. Then on Labour you have the same Brexit, Remainer, Blairite and Corbynite, which are very, very deep-rooted problems for Keir Starmer, because what he's been trying to do ever since he took leadership of the Labour Party, he's tried to bring them all together, but he can't. Jeremy Corbyn has had such an impact on the Labour Party. And let's not forget, this isn't just some crackpot socialist coming in and changing things. People did like him. He nearly became Prime Minister in 2017, and there was a hung parliament for 2 years. When Boris Johnson said in his parliamentary speech that people not only voted for the Conservatives for Brexit, they also rejected Jeremy Corbyn's ideas. Well, I don't think that's necessarily true, because as I say, he had a lot of support. The 2019 referendum was... the 2019 election was because it was mainly a single party... for God's sake, a single issue election. It was pretty much a referendum on Brexit. If you don't support it, you vote Labour. If you support it, you vote Conservative. That's how it was portrayed. And the Conservatives won. There was finally a breakthrough which allowed the Brexit deal to finally be signed earlier this year. And it's still causing us problems, for God's sake. But yes, Keir Starmer now wants to bring everyone back together in the Labour Party. Like, he makes all these speeches on trying to bring Labour together and supporting their traditional values and everything like that. But does he actually know how? No. And that's not me sniping at Keir Starmer. He may have no idea how to, but does anyone on God's green earth know how to unite the 2021 Labour Party? No. I mean, it's even caused him to revive Ed Miliband, who is now Secretary of State for Business, Industrial Planning and Energy, I believe. You know, a Blairite who was thrown in instead of Angela Rayner, who was sacked after the Hartlepool by-election, who was typically more left-wing and more on the side of Corbyn. So he's trying to... I believe Keir Starmer's he's more left-wing himself than what he shows off in Parliament and in public. Like, he was a Remainer. He once said that we should be in the European Medicals Agency. Sorry about that. Which cost him a lot of disapproval recently because of the vaccine rollout. But, you know, that's him. Maybe he's not suited to be leader. Let me just bring up some notes I made earlier. Now, yes, a YouGov poll dated 5th of July, which was yesterday. Disapproval. 59%. 21% approval. Like, Jesus Christ. Boris Johnson has his problems. A political poll for June 28th, a few weeks ago now. Approval for him 48%, disapproval 52%. Now, he has his own problems. He and the Conservatives, they need to try and prove themselves once more. They're trying recently to say, you know, we've had so many restrictions for so long, now we're just going to say we need to live with this disease. That's what they're saying. I mean, I'm probably going to say, well, you know, most adults are vaccinated, at least with one dose. We can't just wait until every single one of us has had a vaccine and we're fully vaccinated and we get a booster, because it will just go on forever. Diseases and viruses, is that the plural? Is it like virus? I don't know, that's stupid. Don't listen to me when it comes to science. But they always mutate. We can't just, every time there's a new variant, say, hang on, we need to close everything down again. We need to, at least somewhat, live with the disease. Because hospitalizations are down. Deaths are down. Like, how much has the economy suffered? Which I think is probably rightly so. I mean, we can't just pretend the economy is more important than human life. But at the same time, is it as dangerous as it was in March last year? No. Because although there's loads of variants, they say it doesn't affect the vaccine's efficiency, so let's get on with it then. Start easing the lockdown restrictions and bring stuff back into normality. So I think if it pulls off, his approval ratings will skyrocket back to normal times. Boris's worst opinion poll for political was for 5th of October 2020, which was disapproval 58, approval 42. Maybe if there was a general election then, maybe Labour would have won. But I will bring up Keir Starmer's again. 59% disapproval, 21% approval. The other faction didn't have an answer for it. This was dated 5th of July. His worst one was in May. I didn't get the exact date, May 2021, 65% approval, 17%. Like, God. He is not popular among Labour supporters, because it sort of reminded me of what Theresa May tried, where she tries to unite Leave and Remain supporters, both public and Conservative MPs, and try to squash them all together and become a strong and stable government, as she kept saying, as she's it was quite poetic, really. She was where she had that cough and she had to stop every few seconds to cough, and then she's also talking about a strong and stable government. It's quite ironic. But anyway, it's like, if you always stay in the middle of the road, you're going to get hit. If you try to please everyone, you'll end up pleasing no one, which I think is what's happening to Keir Starmer right now. Like, it is a very difficult job at the moment. Like, you couldn't do it if you stay up all night, really. I need to get more expressions into me. I will usually just make them up. Yes, what else? Oh yes, John Bercow, former Speaker of the House of Commons and former Conservative MP, has defected and become a member for Labour. Now, I don't know if he's ever going to try and stand as a candidate for Labour. I think there's a possibility he could. I quite like John Bercow, even though politically I don't really know him that well, and sometimes I disagree with him. I like him. I like his personality, and I liked him as Speaker. I think it was good. So, yeah. And Brennan Ed Miliband back in, and Tony Blair commenting that he may want to have a political resurrection. I think it's a lot harder for him to do because of the Iraq War. I mean, Ed Miliband just lost because of a bacon sandwich, but come on. Tony Blair, maybe you're just a bit optimistic about your political chances. But it's sort of like Keir Starmer's gut tells him to go towards the left, but then in actuality towards the left, because he's nowhere near as left-wing as Corbyn, for better or for worse. Again, we don't know either way. Like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. That's Labour at the moment. So he wants to go in his own direction, but then in actuality, he's bringing in all these Blairite and third way Labour people in, and putting them in the spotlight to create what he called a business-friendly Labour. And he thinks that's going to win him support. But do people see it that way? Because now the left of the party are kicking off Diane Abbott, Jeremy Corbyn, especially over the sacking of Angela Rayner. They were very outraged at that, because they want to go back to what it was under Corbyn. Now, in 2019, that cost them dearly, because Corbyn was, as Boris Johnson said, he was gutted by his fellow members and turned into a Remainer because he was a Eurosceptic. And most of the time, Labour didn't even talk about Brexit in their campaigns. I've got a few leaflets of theirs through the door, and none of them mentioned Brexit. None of the ads on YouTube mentioned their official stance on Brexit, and that's what cost them. It wasn't because of all of his socialist ideas, although that pushed some people away from him. I don't think that's what made him so unpopular in 2019, because he was popular in 2017. So how? Did people suddenly watch a Prader U video of some right-winger who has never taken any classes of economics to explain why socialism doesn't work and gets the definitions wrong? Is that what happens? By the way, I'm talking about Ben Shapiro, where he said socialism is when people don't own their own labour, which is pretty ironic because, you know, trade unions and socialists, for better or for worse, say workers should own their own labour. So, and in that video he literally describes capitalism and says it's socialism. When, he's such an idiot. He may have been able to talk fast and outwit bloody students who take gender identity as their degree and have no clue about real politics. Yeah, he may be able to outsmart them, but he lost a debate with Andrew Neil, where it wasn't even a debate, it was an interview. How do you lose an interview? You can have not very good ones, but he literally had to storm out of the interview because he thought that Andrew Neil, of all people, was a lefty. Like, come on, for God's sake, he shouldn't be taken seriously. Like, and he's one of the smart right-wingers in America. Honestly, enough about Ben Shapiro. I've forgotten what I was saying now. Something about Jeremy Corbyn. Oh yeah, I remember. So, Jeremy Corbyn's voters didn't suddenly wake up one day and say, hang on, I'm a Conservative now. It was because of Brexit. It was mostly a single issue election. So, I'm not even mentioning so far the Hartlepool by-election, which was a historic win for the Conservatives, literally, because just like Batley and Spen and a few other seats which the Conservatives miraculously won in 2019, it's a red wall, as they say, constituency. So the red wall is a string of constituency who have, most of which haven't in recent years. Some have never had a Conservative MP, just like Hartlepool, and some of them went over to the Conservatives. Hartlepool didn't in 2019, but they did in this by-election from, I think, June 14th or something. It was in June. So, I think, or May. But anyway, a few months ago. And the Conservatives actually won the majority of the vote. Because in most systems, including first past the post, to win a seat or a constituency or whatever, you just need more votes than the rest of the people standing, which obviously they did. But the Conservatives also got a majority, not only a plurality. They got over 50% of the vote. So, honestly, I don't really understand how they were so conservative, and people theorise it's because of Brexit. They went over to the Conservatives this year, but didn't a few years ago when it was more of an issue. I just don't really understand how it happened. Maybe they just liked Corbyn and then now they like Johnson, but surely if they'd like Corbyn, they wouldn't like Keir Starmer, but they'd hate Johnson. But no, apparently the opposite, especially with all of Starmer's low ratings. So, yes, it is always difficult for left-wing parties. I think it's more difficult for left-wing parties to form a unified support group, because historically it's always been the right-wing who are able to create a massive coalition of voters. Like, they're all voting for the nation, they're all voting for one thing or another, and they can all put aside their differences. But it's a lot more difficult for left-wing parties to do, because take for example a laissez-faire capitalist politician. If someone goes up to them and says, there are homeless people in your town, what are you going to do about it? He will say, well, I've made it a free economy. They can get a job and I won't tax them very much, and they can work their way up. It's got nothing to do with me. But if you ask a left-wing people, there's homeless people in your town, and then they say, well, we will put a homeless shelter here, then people will say, well, hang on, what about the money for the orphanage? Well, we'll have to do half and half. Hang on, some really hardcore religious people over there don't like the gay people over there, and they're about to fight. Which one do you side with? How do people answer that? Because if you ask the right-wing people that, oh well, they both broke the law and they both have their own freedoms. But as I keep saying, left-wingers, they will have to say, well, we need to strike a balance. We can't just say nothing to do with us, because that's their ideology. So I do feel for them, left-wing politicians. They do have to do a lot more work. Well, not a lot more, especially not in a COVID pandemic, but they do have to do work to just keep the party together. Because although the Conservative Party in ever since Brexit, they've been in a state of disunity over it. When Corbyn was threatening a vote of no confidence, all of the Conservatives band together and vote for the government, because they don't want to risk having someone such as Corbyn as Prime Minister. So, as I've said before, it's more like the right wing. When there's a time in need, they naturally go together to save whatever it is. But the Conservative Party in the UK, they're one of the oldest parties in history, and mostly they've been keeping up with the times. I mean, Disraeli, a 19th century Victorian Conservative Prime Minister, when he saw that the Liberal Gladstone was getting a lot of popularity for saying there should be electoral reform, Disraeli also pushed for electoral reform, and he did it before Gladstone, and also had social reform and everything else. So I think, unlike other Conservative parties, the UK one has, they know when to stop, they know when to drop something, they know what to change. They're not just completely ignorant. So they've been existing for one form or another since the 1600s. So the fact that they've all even remained to this day and is still a force to be reasoned with, because unlike the Liberals, they have been in government in and out over these past centuries. As Michael Gove said it, this is not the party of Gladstone, this is the party of Vicky Pollard. Yeah, but, no, but, yeah, but. Which I thought was quite funny. Some clips in Parliament are quite good, I must say, but there's always a few good ones which make me laugh. Yeah, and the Liberal Democrats, especially, they're not going to come back into power ever again, I think, honestly. You know, maybe they'll gain some popularity and they'll get, like, their few seats back, like what they were, like, 5 years ago. Maybe they'd get, I'd say at maximum they'd get 30 seats. If they get 30 seats, I'd be very surprised, but, you know, it could happen. But for the meantime, I think, yeah, they're gonna stick with their, 8 seats, or is it 5 now? I can't remember, but yeah, the Liberals changed to the Liberal Democrats. They were in coalition power in the 2010s, but ever since then they just fell off. I do not like the Liberal Democrats at all. Well, what makes them so unpopular? Sort of the same reasons as Labour. Where they're seen as, by the people, as, you know, sort of a party of wets. They don't really think, they're not a party of conviction, because although Keir Starmer wants to portray the Labour Party as that, he wants to show everyone that he can get Britain through the pandemic better than Boris Johnson, that the Labour Party can and will stand for their valuable traditions. That they will stand with the working class, and that they will have a specific answer. That largely hasn't happened, you know. So Margaret Thatcher was a conviction politician. She even said after her premiership that she doesn't believe in everyone coming together and forming their own. She doesn't believe in people coming together and sort of deciding on one thing between themselves. She thinks that people should know what politicians believe in, and they vote for who those politicians want. So I'm not saying whether she's good or bad, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing, but at least people back then, they knew, okay, she wants to create a free market economy, she wants to loosen regulations, she wants to diminish trade union power, she wants to make some council flats available for purchase. Like, people knew that's what she wanted, and that's why she was called the Iron Lady, and that's what I think made her popular. Because she didn't back down. I mean, with this current government, someone could say, well, you know, it's a pandemic, they have to change and react, or we're just doomed. Which, I mean, fair enough, you maybe not at the extent of which they have done, but, you know, it's a debate to be had by future politics students, really, and I do pity them, because it can't be that exciting, can it? What else was I talking about last time before I accidentally deleted my file? So, Keir Starmer, is he going to be forced out? Is he going to be replaced by a left-wing leader more akin to Corbyn? Is he going to be kicked out by a Blairite? Is he going to get shoved off by a familiar face like Ed Miliband? Maybe he could become Labour leader again. Who knows? Maybe even Tony Blair. I cannot say. But I do think it's more likely that Keir Starmer will be leader of the Labour Party and he wouldn't resign, just as Johnson isn't resigning from a Conservative leader. So yes, the Blairites, so the centrists and the left of the party, they're just tearing at each other's throats now. They're just blaming each other. The Corbynites are saying it's, we need conviction, we need to tell the people in our manifesto, we need socialism, we need all these welfare systems, we just need Corbyn 2.0. I think some even want him back full stop. And then on the other side they say, hang on, you cost us 2 elections which could easily have been won. Well, what is Keir Starmer supposed to do? Is he supposed to... Because he has to choose a side. He can't just stay neutral forever, especially if he actually wants to become Prime Minister, which of course he does. He has to take one side or the other and stick with it, but at the moment he's kind of feeling around, trying to find what's right and what the people want and then stick with it. But the problem is that the people don't seem to like anything. He has to eventually anger one side and ignore one side and just go with what one people want. And that is difficult. As I keep saying, it's extremely difficult to make that decision. But, I don't see Labour coming into government. Say if there was an election in a month, I wouldn't be surprised if they lose almost every seat and we become a one-party state. I wouldn't be surprised. But I saw some political cartoon a few weeks ago of Keir Starmer as a chick or a duckling or something, and he breaks out of his shell, then he sort of walks around a bit, and then he goes back into the shell and he tries to patch all of it up, because, he's been leader for about, nearly 2 years, and what has he actually done? What does he stand for? Interestingly, it didn't seem to do Biden any harm, because he was running for president for the Democrats, and, what did he actually stand for? That's what a lot of people criticised him for, is he just seems to be anti-Trump. Whatever Trump does, he needs to do the opposite. He didn't really have, like Bernie Sanders, people know he wants Medicare for all, he wants no tuition fees, he wants all of that, but really, what does Biden want? Does he support that or not? Does he not want any of it? Does he want some of it? It was hard to tell. Although Keir Starmer says what he wants for different subjects, he doesn't really... Although he says what he wants on different subjects, like easing lockdown, he opposes it, I believe. He's very passionate about like the meals for school kids, and he should be. It's hard not to be, but to some he's too left wing. To others, he's too right wing, and for the people left, he means nothing. And I do feel for him. I honestly do. But are Labour on the rise? That's the original question. To be honest, I think no. It's very difficult for them to fall much lower, but especially now, until Labour sort of realise where they went wrong, and until Labour honestly says, this is the approach we need. We need to do this, and we either need to go to the left or go to the centre, and we need to do it quickly, and we need to stay there. That is what Labour need to do, and until then I do not see them as a party who can get into government, especially when a lot of the working class vote Conservative. And whether that be because they believe in capitalism or they just dislike Labour, maybe they just like Johnson, maybe they're Brexiteers, who knows, but it's a lot of them recently are voting Conservative. And I don't think it's a shift to the right in the country. I don't think there's any monumentum towards the right. We're still a left-wing country. I mean, a Conservative Prime Minister raising NHS spending when and bailing out loads of jobs, and people even making fun of the Conservatives for giving away too much money when the quote left winners in America aren't even doing that. They're just, if anything, Biden is if he was a UK politician, he'd be in the Conservative Party. He'd be a socially liberal Conservative. And that's all Democrats are. They're just capitalists who like liberalism. They're just modern liberals. So all these Republicans saying, "Oh, they're socialists," they're dog whistling communists. No, they're not. They're modern liberals in their ideology. Republicans are classical liberals in their economic ideologies. They are not that different. They have a few changes and they completely tear themselves apart from it. Is that happening with modern Labour? Probably is. Because although they will all vote, well, mostly against the Conservatives, especially if it's a very right-wing issue, they will most likely band together. But there's no actual unity. There's no singular Labour Party anymore. It was in the 40s, 60s. I mean, Clement Attlee, why doesn't he have a statue in Westminster Square? I have no clue. No clue whatsoever. He's arguably the most successful Prime Minister ever. Like, apart from Winston Churchill, because obviously you need to be exceptional to surpass Winston Churchill's as a Prime Minister for the war. I mean, not later on in the 50s. I don't think he was really that influential for the latter part of for his political career, but Clement Attlee is, you know, he wanted to decolonise India and other parts of the empire peacefully. That's what happened. He wanted to set up the National Health Service. That's what happened. He was a working class candidate. Now, do we have that here? Do we have the, we no longer have the Harold Wilsons or the Clement Attlees in modern Labour. It is a shame, because although I don't like to admit it, sometimes these far-right lunatic, well, not necessarily far-right, not like dangerous far-rights, but, you know, the people who are a bit dodgy and you don't really want to be friends with them, those people, they're sometimes right when they say Labour has lost the working class vote, and they actually have to work to get it back. It's not something they can just say, well, I've appointed a new shadow secretary, now everything's going to be better. They have to do everything perfectly to get it back. Just because Labour lost it doesn't mean the Conservatives gained it. People talk as if the Red Wall was smashing the Red Wall was a permanent thing. It wasn't. It will come back, and even then, you know, they didn't get all of them. There's still a Red Wall. Conservatives or Labour haven't broken through in Scotland yet. And the Scottish Conservatives are quite different to the Conservative Party. So, yes, I do not think Labour's on the rise quite yet. But thank you for listening. If you're still here, God, somehow you're still here, and I thank that. Although I don't get tens of thousands of views or hundreds of views or tens of views, I do not care. Like, if I just see 4 views on any video, it inspires me to carry on. So, yes, if you're here, this is easily the longest video I've ever done, probably the longest I'll make in quite a long time. So, yes, this has been the Bout of Insanity podcast. I thank you for listening, and I will see you again next week.